Hi guys, I'm Bree, and for this project, I was assigned the topic of sex work in America or other countries. I'm specifically researching the male sex worker population, and looking at the hidden experience of male sex workers. Before I get into it, I'm just going to go over what exactly I will be discussing for this presentation, which will be why I chose a specific population, um, looking at the definition of sex work overall and how that relates to the population that I'm discussing, um, some wide scope statistics on male sex work, and then looking at specific experiences of male sex workers, and connection to the COVID-19 pandemic as well. And then the different avenues of sex work for males. And then to close it off, I'm going to talk about why I think it's important to discuss this specific topic and population. The reason I chose to look at this specific population, which is male sex workers, is because I don't think that it's discussed very often in relation to sex work. And honestly, don't really have a lot of knowledge about it, or at least I didn't before this project, because I feel like every conversation I've ever had about sex work or I've ever heard of has been in the context of women being the sex workers. And I think that as someone who works at a shelter with homeless youth who are very much vulnerable to sex work, I think it's important for me to understand sex work from all angles so that I can be a resource for them and I'm not kind of like in the blind about it. Before I fully get into the presentation, I'm just going to read off the definition of sex work so that everyone is on the same page and understands what I mean when I say sex work. So the World Health Organization defines sex work as the provisions of sexual services for money or goods. Sex workers are women, men, and transgendered people who receive money or goods in exchange for sexual services and who consciously define those activities as income generating, even if they do not consider sex work as their occupation. So I found a variety of relevant statistics regarding male sex workers in America and in outside countries. In general, overall, there's approximately 8 to 8.42 million males that participate in sex work, out of the global amount that has been found, which is 40 million sex workers worldwide. A research article that I found looked at men who sell sex over the internet, and that research study identified 100,000 unique male escorts globally. The most male escorts were found in Mexico, the United States, Brazil, Spain, and the United Kingdom, in that order. So the most male escorts were identified in Mexico. Of those sites that were selling sex from men, 57% catered to men, 11% catered to women, and 10% focused on men selling to couples. And they were also able to figure out what the average price was for sex, specifically men selling sex, and found that the average price worldwide was around $200 an hour. The avenues of sex work for men vary in how the male sex work environment is very diverse. This can include the streets, public sex environments like parks and trains, truck stops, gay bars, saunas. It can also be in places like brothels, massage parlors, bars, go-go clubs. Those are more established areas. And then sex workers can even work independently in their homes or in their clients' homes or in hotel rooms. And I think increasingly during these times, the internet has been a place in which male sex workers have thrived. I mean, all sex workers, but that includes male sex workers. And with the COVID pandemic, sex work definitely looks different, and has kind of shifted into one specific avenue, that being the internet or social media apps. As I mentioned, at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, sex workers have had to shift gear towards online streaming platforms. So, because of health and safety concerns, the pandemic has jeopardized the income of a lot of these workers, which is why many have had to adapt into online forms of sex work. Online streaming platforms have gained so much popularity during the pandemic that they have even become mainstream. One of these being OnlyFans, which is a streaming service that allows individuals to upload X-rated content. Data shows that within the first few months of the pandemic, OnlyFans reported 3.5 million new accounts, even just in the month of March. One common underlying experience for male sex workers is lack of education on their sexual health and lack of accessibility to resources. Although there's been a global response to the treatment and prevention of HIV and other sexually transmitted infections, little is known about the male sex work population in terms of how they are affected by HIV and sexually transmitted infections, which can lead to inadequate services and the exclusion of male sex workers from receiving services altogether. The stigma associated with sex work as well as homosexuality has made a lot of male sex workers resistant or hesitant to seek services altogether and to be upfront about their experience with HIV or other sexually transmitted infections. Many male sex workers living with HIV have complained of being denied appropriate treatment and diagnostic services. As I mentioned, another underlying experience of male sex workers is increased stigma and invisibility. Although all sex workers experience stigma, male sex workers face the increased stigma of both sex work and homosexuality. Because conversations often surround female sex workers, men are often left out, which is inconsiderate of their experience and rights as sex workers. In societies in which homosexuality is frowned upon, male sex workers experience that much more invisibility, and how they're kept a secret since they don't fit into the idea that sex work is a feminine profession. Just to look at the experiences of sex workers in other countries, I included a video discussing the documentary Boys for Sale, which looks at male sex workers in Tokyo.
My name is Ian Thomas Ash, and I'm a producer on the documentary Boys for Sale. And this is Ko.
Hi, my name is Ko. The film is about my past job. It's about male sex worker in Tokyo.
I've lived in Japan for 17 years and I've made documentaries about lots of topics. I also am gay, and when I heard about these guys working in these sex bars, they're called urisen, I was really interested to know more about them.
エスコートクラブですね。エスコートバー。それが一番わかりやすいですね。まずお客さんが入ると、男の子たちがカウンターの中にいて、みんな立つんですね。立ってる男の子たちを指名していただいて、もし好みの子がいたら一緒にね、席についてお酒をまず飲んでもらう。
お客さんのテーブルについてお酒を飲むっていうだけだと、30分で500円もらえるんですけど、
それで話がね合えば外にデートに連れて行ってもらうというそういうシステムですね、簡単に言うと。
でこういうお部屋とかをホテルも利用してその性的なプレーをするっていう。
この個室は本当はお客さんとエッチのためのお部屋です。レンタルルームとしても営業してるんでエッチするところです。
Can you talk about the anti-prostitution law?
It's difficult.
But it's between a man and a woman.
Yeah,
So
only
the law doesn't mention sex between men.
men.
And so it's technically not illegal because it's not mentioned in the law. The young men in the film that we interviewed, they weren't approaching it as a career that they had trained for, and that there wasn't a kind of understanding about how to protect themselves and about how to do this work safely. One of the messages of the film is about how the inability for homosexual people in Japan to kind of live freely also means that there's not this kind of free exchange of information and the knowledge that people need to have to protect themselves. I think one of the things about Shinjuku is that people can go there, and it's been known as the gay district for 50 years, and people can go there and kind of feel free and kind of live their lives. When they leave that area, a friend of mine tells a story that you can see men that when they enter that area, they start to hold hands and they walk around, and women as well. But that when you see them enter the main intersection and cross the street and go out of the area, they immediately stop holding hands, and that there's this really a delineation that I can be myself and who I am within these city blocks, but that when I leave that area, I have to go back to pretending like I'm everybody else in this society.
The sex workers is kind of hidden and kind of not talked about. But sex workers are everywhere. You don't have to accept, but you to understand how we live and how we work and how we feel.
Our hope is that it's going to resonate with all people, and it's just a very human story. The young men that are involved in this work they all have their own individual personal reason for doing it, and I think that we can learn a lot about what it means to be human and about life just through them so honestly sharing their stories.
The reason why I think this specific topic is important to discuss is because not enough attention is given to the obstacles that this population faces, and there isn't enough research done on the experiences of male sex workers. There's also double stigmatization of homosexuality as well as sex work, and that also gets in their way of them being able to stand up for their rights and for their safety. There's also ongoing discourse on the decriminalization of prostitution, and the way that can cause safety benefits for sex workers. And I think understanding the experiences of male sex workers should be considered in that conversation. So yeah, overall, I would say this research project has been a very eye-opening experience and has made it clear that there isn't enough awareness for this specific population that provides sex work.